Growing food in the heat of summer. The main concern for many American gardeners right now is the intense heat and how it's impacting the produce we were expecting to harvest earlier in the season. In our home, whatever has survived the heat, which has surprisingly been quite a lot, has unfortunately fallen victim to harlequin bugs. So I have a big patch of kale decimated by harlequin bugs because I keep opening my netting. My flowers have been eaten by deer. Um, Everything that's outside, basically. The production garden that's fenced in is eaten by deer. And my husband's nemesis within the production garden that's fenced in is a groundhog that keeps coming in and keeps eating our beefsteak tomatoes before they turn red. And it just takes one bite. It's really frustrating. So, pest side, let's address that first challenge, the heat, right? How do we grow in this hot weather? It's hard to break this to you, but a lot of the prep work for the summer should be done earlier in the season. Nevertheless, I'm still going to give you some tips. So if the stuff is still surviving where you are, there's still some things you can do to keep them going. And at this point in time, if you are in a very, very hot climate, the things that are surviving are hopefully your watermelons, your corn, your basil, those hot loving, your tomatoes, those hot loving plants. So if your plants, so number one, water. Number two, mulch. Number three, compost. Number four, shade. So those are the four things I'm going to talk about next. So first, water. If your plants are drying up due to neglect, so for instance, yesterday it rained. So of course I put my potted plants out to capture the rain. And I forgot to bring them in today where it was 100 degrees and they were all drying up. So I hope they didn't totally die, but that was neglect on my part, right? So if your plants are drying up due to neglect in a climate where rainfall is scarce, this is your first priority, watering. Water deep and early in the morning, early in the day. Some people decide they want to do it in the evening. That's fine. I just don't like it because I have lots of mosquitoes out there and it's just much better, much more pleasant in the morning when there's less chance of evaporation. In our Virginia home, this happens around 6 a.m. and we don't have a drip irrigation set up yet because we didn't think we needed it last year. We didn't need it. But this year it's been really hot and we do have hoses and buckets, and that's what we're doing first thing in the morning. Drip irrigation is a great investment for those who have a hard time keeping up with the watering in a larger area with many beds and just the time to fill up the buckets of water. If you're a mom with small kids, this may not be the best, drip irrigation may be your best friend. And if your budget allows it, right? It's not, I would say it's like maybe you can get a kit for $100 or so. That's the last time I checked. So maybe inflation's gone up, but I highly recommend it. And we have the apparatus actually in our home, but we haven't set it up yet because we have other priorities that we need to set up. It's costing us time not to set it up. But our other main garden priority now is the fence because of the wildlife eating $400 worth of our produce. But there, water, drip irrigation, if you can, Oya pots if you are in the desert, and the second is mulch. And mulching is so underrated, but so necessary. So sometimes we'll be growing living mulch, like sweet potatoes at this time of the year, because it's the summertime. In the spring, we have strawberries, and maybe we have thyme, creeping thyme growing, oregano going crazy, mints going crazy. Even the mints are kind of flagging at this point in time, but they are still up, and the bees and the pollinators are really depending on the mints at this point in time. But if there's no water, the mints dry up, right? Mulching keeps that water in, and they act like, and if they've been established, they can be, your plants can be in stasis for a little bit and keep that moisture in. Mulching reduces the need to water your plants by at least 25%, according to Brad Lancaster, author of Rainwater Harvesting for Drylands, a book that we highly recommend, especially if you're in Arizona, Utah, California, those places. You need this book. books. There are two books, but I mean, just getting one of them will give you a lot of ideas, and just his videos, his website's really great. We use straw to mulch. We don't necessarily use wood chip mulch except in perennial beds. But let's say you used wood chip mulch and that's what you're using, it's better than no mulch at all. And it's not bad because it'll eventually break down into the soil. So everything will be fine in the end. Um, it You can just observe first. I'd rather there be some mulch rather than no mulch. And straw is the thing that we like to use because it's kind of airy and fluffy. It's like the equivalent of putting on top maybe like something that had more air pass, than heavy wood chip mulch at this point in time. And this extra layer of soil needn't be an additional input from the outside world. So, for instance, you don't have the means to purchase or the ability to bring straw bales into your garden, into your home. You can use the leaf mulch that your neighbors are discarding in bags. You can use your own grass clippings. And um, I hope to include a picture of Vivian, who's cleverly used shredded paper, because we always have a surplus of paper from our kids' works, from our own stuff at home, and that shredded looks ugly, of course, but in the interim, for this season of July when it's super hot, use it and you will save your plants. You will save some plants for sure, as it acts like a cover to keep the moisture in, especially after heavy watering. That's permaculture applied right there. So kudos to Vivian. And composting is the third. So we talked about watering, we talked about mulch, and the third is composting. At this point, our plants, such as tomatoes, are likely flagging. You're seeing maybe blossom end rot, you're seeing some cracking. If that's you, it's because there's not enough nutrition. It's used up the nutrition and it's stressed by the heat, therefore impeding its ability to get more nutrition. There's no water to bring that cycle of nutrients up to it. And that is definitely going to stress out your plants, no matter how much nutrients there are currently in your soil. And composting helps just boost the nutrients, boost the life in the soil to carry that, the cycle, decompose more, to give nutrients back into the soil, to do a lot of outsourcing of the work that you try so hard. We think that it's all dependent on us, that these plants grow, but really it's depending on the microbiota that's around the plants. Now, before I get ahead of myself, a lot of my research is on compost tea, which is simply, so for my research purposes, it's bubbling compost, suspending compost in water in order to bubbling it to facilitate the growth of the aerobic bacteria. So you're giving it an aerobic environment and feeding it with certain foods, microbial foods, so that certain bacterial families proliferate. And that is all to say, you don't have to be as complicated as that if compost tea is new to you. If it is not new to you, if you're looking to learn more about compost tea, just click on the link that's in this blog. But if you're new to composting, it's like, what is that? I don't even know how to make compost and where to get compost and all that stuff. Just put, if you can purchase compost, or if you have compost, if you can kind of put in water, and instead of watering just with plain water, water with water that has compost tea in it. It's like, instead of drinking just plain water for yourself, you drink green juice. And that's a way of just boosting the nutrients in the soil, making them have access. So at once you're infusing the bacteria into the soil. Whereas if you just compost side dress, you just put them on the side, may not get to the roots where they need to go. Or if you do compost and side dress, water it once so they go down deep and spread, because you want them everywhere. And compost tea makes that available in more places than just one. Okay, so third, composting. And then fourth is shading. So finally, the fourth tip I have to offer is for us to create some sort of temporary shade for our plants, or chickens, or the life that we want to thrive in this really hot season. So don't smother them in a tarp. That's for the winter time when we're trying to smother. We sometimes will do winter growing, and then we'll have growing um, them under hoops. We don't want that same plastic that we use during the winter time. If you're not from the hot climates and you're in the north and you are used to growing with under hoops, then you know that that's not the one that you want to use for the summertime. I say this because I've done that, and I've almost killed my strawberry patch in the spring trying to see if that kind of helps protect them. Or no, we want a breathable cover. We want a garden mesh that's for the bugs, but we want a breathable cover, like a blanket maybe over on stilts, on tarps, to kind of like, say this one here, like that, to act like as a shade, and to act as a shade for your crops. So that way they get a little bit of a respite, especially, you don't have to do it forever because it might look ugly. Um, you don't have to do it forever. You just have to do it for the weeks that are super, super hot. Okay. And then find creative ways. Maybe it's like a few sticks and old sheets. Maybe it's just you happen to have, you have an awning, Um, find creative ways to shield your plants from the sun that they don't need, even if only for a few days. So I've given you 4 tips: watering, mulching, shading, composting, and shading. Which one do you do this summer? Okay, I'm most of the time I say pick one and go with it. Okay, if you are confident in the 3 others, and there's one of those that you have, if any of those are like gaps in your growing scheme, or growing protocol, then go ahead and just pick one. But I would say you want to do all 4. If you want your plants to survive, you want to do all 4 of those. If it's super hot where you are, like in the 90s and the hundreds. And then in the weeks to come, I'm going to give a little bit of a tip on what not to do. And I'm not going to include it here because I just want to focus first on what you need to do. This is the first part. Okay, so then next up, we'll talk about what not to do during the summer. But don't worry, it is crucial that you get those 4 things done: watering, mulching, composting, and shading this time of the year. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's been helpful, and that I hope that I'm rooting for your plants just as I'm rooting for ours. Like, we have lost so many tomatoes, so many. The only thing that survived is the peppers. And for some of you, the peppers are not surviving. So, yes, I also mourn your loss because we feel it hard too. But I want to give you hope, to keep and encouragement to keep on growing against the odds, despite the fact that there is a lot of heat and climate change. You can always bring some plants in that are super, super stressed and see what happens, and keep on growing indoors. But more about that in the weeks to come as I support you in this super hot growing season. Thanks.